In this lesson, we're going to learn how to round decimals. In our previous lesson, we learned how to round whole numbers, and the steps are pretty much the same. We find the place value that we want to focus on, look to the neighbor, and then the neighbor tells us what our place value should do. But with decimals, we do need to pay extra careful attention to what place value we're being told that we need to round to. So if you don't already remember all of your place values for decimals, make sure that you get some practice with those. Let's look at our first example. We're going to round this number to the thousandths place. Now remember, whenever the place value name ends with TH at the end, that's a big clue that our place value is after the decimal point. So our digit that's in the thousandths place is the 8. So now we need to figure out what that 8 is going to do. So we ask the neighbor, which is the 3. Since 3 is less than 5, then our 8 will stay the same. Anything to the left of it, all those digits in the front, 517.96, none of those digits are affected. So let's just copy those over. And now we know that our 8 is going to stay the same, and then anything after it becomes a 0. So that 3 would become a 0, just like we learned with whole numbers. Now with decimals, whenever you have a 0 at the end, we don't have to necessarily write it in. So we can just get rid of that 0 that's at the end and make our final answer 517.968. Or we can read it as 517 and 968 thousandths. But the important thing when we're rounding decimals is to make sure that the last digit is in whatever place value we want to round to. So since we're rounding to the thousandths place, we want the last digit to be in the thousandths place. So that's why we were able to leave that 0 off at the end as well, because we only really needed to stop at the 8. Now let's look at what happens when we round to the hundredths place. The 6 is the digit that's in the hundredths place. We look to the neighbor, the 8, to see what that 6 will do. Since the 8 is in that 5 or higher category, that tells us that the 6 is going to round up and become a 7. Remember, all the digits in front of that, though, will stay the same, so let's copy those over. Now the 6 will round up to a 7, and everything after becomes a 0. Just like we mentioned before, though, we don't really need to leave all those zeros at the end, so we can knock those off. Now we have 517 and 97 hundredths. As long as the last digit in our final answer is in the place value that we're rounding to, in this case the hundredths, then we're good to go. Let's look at one more example. This time we're going to round to the tenths place. Our digit that's in the tenths place is a 9. We look to the neighbor, the 6. The 6 is going to tell us that our 9 is going to round up. Now if we round 9 up, it becomes 10. But we can't fit a 1 and a 0 in that spot. We can only fit one digit in that place value. So that means that the 1 from our 10 is going to carry over to the 7. And now the 7 is going to become an 8. So now we have 518.0. Okay, let's take a look at what just happened there. The 9 needed to round up, so it became a 10. But the 1 from the 10 got carried over to the 7. That made the 7 become an 8, and then the 0 from our 10 was what is left in that position where the 9 was. Now just like we've been doing, everything after can become a 0, And just like with any decimal, any zeros at the end can be knocked off. But remember, since we need to round this number to the tenths place, we need to still have a digit left in the tenths place position. So we still need to keep the 0 that's in the tenths place, but we can knock off the other zeros after that. So now our answer is 518.0. And yes, this is technically a whole number, 518, but because they asked us to round to the tenths place, we need to make sure that our last digit is in the tenths place. So that's why we have to keep that 0 at the end there. So just to review, when we're rounding decimals, okay, we round to the place value that the directions tell us to do, and we need to make sure that the last digit is in that place value. And then any zeros after that, we can just drop them off. Now you know how to round decimals.